My name is Kaitlin, and my pronouns are she and her.
And my name is Christine, and my pronouns are also she and her. Kaitlin and I are both peer educators with MAVEN through the Office of Sexual Violence Prevention, Education, and Response at MacEwan. And MAVEN focuses on educating the wider MacEwan community on the importance of consent in the efforts of eliminating sexual violence.
This video is part of our Topic of the Week initiative brought to you by members of our MAVEN Peer Education team. Throughout this video series, each week we'll be focusing on key topics within the scope of sexual violence. This week, we are focusing on self and community care.
So to get started, let's go over what self-care is. Self-care is any activity that you can do to take care of your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. This includes tending to your basic needs and overall well-being. Practicing self-care helps to balance out the effects of emotional and physical stressors that we may experience. So let's go over each layer of health in relation to self-care.
So first up is physical, which includes engaging your body through activity or rest to cope with stress. This can be practiced by doing some form of physical activity, such as going outside for some fresh air or resting longer in bed when you need it.
Next up is emotional. This includes how you deal with your emotions without the labels of good or bad emotions. This can be done by giving yourself the space and time to acknowledge and process complex emotions, connecting with someone you care about, or writing down your emotions in as many words as you need.
Third is spiritual, which allows you to get in touch with your values, what really matters to you. Spirituality is about connecting to yourself and connecting with something greater. A really good practice for this type of self-care is to practice journaling your spirituality, yoga, or going to places in which your spirituality takes place.
The next layer of health is mental. This can look like giving yourself a boost by doing a task you've avoided or try to challenge your brain in a new way. This one could be tricky, but sometimes some great practices include taking on some new challenges, decluttering a space, cooking a new recipe, and reading.
All right, moving on to pleasure means to engage in a pleasurable activity. Do something you enjoy. Some examples include dressing yourself up, eating your favorite meal, or any form of both physical and non-physical intimacy that make you feel comfortable are all great.
Next, I'm going to talk about sensory. This focuses on sensations to help ground you in the moment. Also, sometimes limiting the sensory outputs in your area can help to decompress. Other practices can include lighting a candle, listening to music, baking, being in comfy clothing, or eating something you love.
And lastly, we have social. Connecting with others who help lift up your spirits can be a great way to exercise social self-care. This can be hard within a pandemic. However, doing things like journaling, like joining a local community program, video calling friends and family, online gaming, or texting people that make you happy are great methods of social self-care.
All right, moving on from self-care to community care. Community care involves seeing social interactions as a method for giving back to one another. Community care is about refusing the idea that care is solely an individual responsibility. By coming together as a community and sharing resources, both non-physical and physical, communities can collectively support each other's well-being.
So we can practice community care in a couple of different ways. First off, we can refuse isolation and working towards building supportive relationships and communities. This is challenging within a global pandemic. However, establishing safe emotional connections that fall within the parameters of health guidelines are essential to healthy self and community care. Secondly, it's important that we try to work against the impulses for self-care to be individualized and romanticized. Self-care isn't always glamorous, and it doesn't have to be an indulgence. Self-care is unique to the individual, as it includes anything you need in that moment to recharge, relax, to feel grounded, or else mentally sound.
The next element of community care is to create networks of support. Community care requires caring for each other by checking in with each other, encouraging each other's wellness and well-being, and any other acts aimed at building up your community. For example, if you know someone who's having a particularly hard time Instead of asking, "How are you?" specify that you're checking in with them. Some examples of phrases you can use are, "Hi, I just wanted to check in with you. How have you been feeling?" Or, "I know you've been having a hard time lately and want to check in. What can I do to support you?"
Absolutely. So lastly, keep in mind that community care involves learning to reach out to others and asking for help when you need it. This is a lifelong learning process that can be tough at times. Learning to lean on and support each other reminds us that we aren't meant to manage everything on our own. It creates a system of mutual intimacy, compassion, and kindness that's meant to support each other.
Before we move on, it's essential that we all remember that self-care isn't selfish. There's nothing wrong with having needs, and we have the right to care to those needs. Turning down a dinner with friends doesn't have to be selfish or make you feel guilty for choosing yourself and your mental health. This brings us to the importance of setting boundaries as an act of self-care. Boundaries are defined as an external expression of our internal limits. A quote from Adrienne Marie Brown helps highlight this. "Your no makes way for your yes. Boundaries create the container within which your yes is authentic. Being able to say no makes yes a choice."
Boundaries are usually understood in the literal sense as it pertains to physical or sexual boundaries, but there are other forms of boundaries as well. For example, an important one related to self-care are material boundaries. This includes labor, money, and time. For example, it can include setting boundaries on how much time you spend on homework a day, or maybe how many classes you know you can handle at once in order to take care of your mental health. It can also mean setting limits for yourself on how much time you spend on social media if you find that it negatively impacts your well-being or distracts you from looking after your other needs.
In addition, this can also, like mentioned above, be like feeling okay with saying no to activities with friends or family to look after yourself for the evening. And this also works in reverse by respecting others' boundaries by not pushing them to come with you or making them feel guilty at all. This also has special importance within the context of a pandemic in respecting others' boundaries surrounding health and safety. For example, even if, say, the Alberta government said it was okay to dine with friends not from our household again, if your friend still felt uncomfortable, remember that them saying no, they are relaying to you their boundaries, and it is important to respect and listen to these when they're communicated to you.
Learning about your own boundaries is an act of self-care because you are becoming aware of your needs and any limits that you have, and we are becoming attuned to listening to each other's needs as well. This is the process of creating community care, a system of mutual respect, support, and empathy. Through this, we can learn how we can be stronger together and aim to create positive social change within our communities.
All right, that's all for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in for this week's Topic of the Week video. As the semester is winding down, remember to look after yourself and each other. Take care.